Good evening and welcome to the Sound Off on Student Debt Town Hall and Workshop. Aren't you excited to be here? My name is Nicordoli Corte. I'm here this evening representing the 33rd District Congressional Council, a grassroots organizing vehicle intended to inform and engage constituents on the issues that matter most to us. This evening, we'll have a presentation from Representative Bass on what President Obama and Congress are doing to help Americans like us manage our student loan debt. In addition, we have Rohit Chopra, Student Loan Ombudsman from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, an agency recently created by the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act. We are so glad to have him here with us to discuss his role in the organization in terms of ensuring a fair student loan market. We'll also have time a little bit later in our program for questions and answers, and so don't worry.
Move this down a little bit for me. Good evening, my name is Nicole Vasquez. I'm the co-MC for your event tonight. So Representative Bass, as always, is working hard for us in Washington, D.C., and she's going to introduce legislation that would extend interest-free deferments to all unemployed borrowers of federal student loans. It would also suspend interest during periods of unemployment for borrowers participating in the income-based repayment program and borrowers consolidating their loans. So when you signed in tonight, you should have received this Name This Bill card. So we want your good thinking and your creativity, and we need your help naming this bill. We already have had a few ideas and some examples. So for example, we have the Helping Graduates Succeed Act. We have the Protect America's Grad Act. But I know all of you can come up with much better creative names for a bill than that. So please fill out the card before you leave. And if your name for the bill is selected, you'll be notified by the Office of Congressmember Karen Bass, which is obviously very exciting. So tonight's program consists of two parts. The first part is this town hall that we're having right now. The second part of the program is your choice of one of two workshops. One is facilitated by the Department of Education, and the second workshop is being facilitated by the Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles and the National Consumer Law Center. We also have representatives from the financial aid departments of USC and Cal State Dominguez Hills, and Sally May here tonight to provide one-on-one counseling. Additionally, we have a representative from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau to answer questions only. So we have a lot to do. We have a lot of resources here for you tonight. So to get us started, I would like to introduce our representative in DC, Congressmember Karen Bass.
Woo, boy, this room filled up. I was sitting here in front. I didn't realize how many people were here. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming tonight. It's really it's my pleasure that you're here tonight. And let me just say, because I want to talk about how this came about. I guess there were a few months ago, one of the things that I really take a lot of pleasure in doing is working with young people who are interested in politics. And so there were about 35 people that were in my living room. Is anybody here that was over my house that day? And we were sitting around talking about, issues that were important to you. And you guys told me that this issue was of critical importance to you. And I mean, I already knew that because of, the young people that I encounter. But, I just have felt so bad for your generation. And I say that all the time because I feel like my generation owes you a big apology because we left you with debt that what used to be when we graduated college, we could have bought a house with what you're paying back in loans. And I just think that we need to do something about that. And so you guys told me that the biggest issue you had was around the interest accumulating, especially while you were unemployed or looking for a job or underemployed. And so in consultation with you, I'm introducing a piece of legislation that was just described, but I'm terrible when it comes to names. So I need you to help me name this bill that I'm going to introduce. And maybe you'll come up with some snazzy name and you'll, give me an answer. But what I did after meeting with you that evening was we came up with a survey, and we put the survey on the web, and we asked young people from, around the country, whoever would go to the website and would respond to, would answer some questions. And I want to give you preliminary results of that survey in a minute. We're going to do a PowerPoint legislation. But let me just say that there is legislation pending before Congress to provide relief from student debt. Congressman Cohen from Tennessee is introducing legislation to restore fairness for struggling borrowers faced with insurmountable education debt. I've had a lot of people tell me that you call up and you try to arrange payments, and you say, well, I'm only making $20,000 a year, and I can pay $100 a month, and whoever it is will tell you that's just not enough. That's not acceptable. You have to pay $500 a month, and I don't know how you're supposed to pay that and make your rent and all. Representative Hanson Clark from Detroit has introduced the Student Loan Forgiveness Act, which would forgive the entire balance of federal student loan debt if a borrower makes payments equal to 10% of their discretionary income for 10 years. One of the, as we're sitting around and everybody knows the Supreme Court is debating the Affordable Care Act and whether or not they're going to be able to overturn that, one of the greatest accomplishments, in my opinion, of the Obama administration in the first couple of years was finance reform. And it's because of finance reform that we have the Consumer Financial Services Bureau, and now we have the representative from there. You might remember that agency because, the president was trying to make that appointment for a long time, and the Republicans kept blocking it. And wasn't it at the end of last year? It was in December. Oh, it was in January that he went ahead and just said, to heck with him, and made the appointment anyway. And they said that they were going to take him to court, and it was unconstitutional and all of that. But anyway, the head of that agency is in place, and I met him last week, and he did us the great service of sending out his #1 representative from Washington, who you'll be hearing from in a few minutes. So we're getting the best straight from Washington to begin to help us with this problem. But know that he's been in his position for 3 months, so it's not that he's going to come with all the answers. But the point is that we're getting started. And so we know how this works. This is the beginning. And I'm so glad that everyone is here today. And I'm hoping that, after brief presentations, we can get down to business and actually solve some problems. But, this is the beginning, and I know that there will be much more time that we will need to spend in order to really resolve this problem. So let me give you the results of this survey. You're going to help me with this, Lauren? See, I have to have somebody do the PowerPoint since I don't know how to work it. But anyway, we called it the sound off on student debt, and I think we had, we will learn how many people responded to the survey. And by the way, you can go on the internet after you leave here and fill out the survey, and I would really appreciate you doing that. You can go on, Lauren. So, education and student debt, success in the United States, advancing education, post-college debt should not equal a mortgage. It just shouldn't. And, and I think about you young folks graduating college and wanting to get started and then thinking about, will you ever be able to buy a house? You can continue. Student loan, for the first time in history, student loan debt has outpaced credit card debt. And, I would ask that maybe when you speak, you explain one of the actions that the president did where he took back because basically we were taking the national treasure and handing it over to banks. Is that right? And saying, you do student loans. And so one of the actions that the president did was he took that industry back. And I just have to tell you, I had student loan debt too. I won't tell you how much I had because you'll feel really bad. But, I never had loan sharks coming after me. And that's what you guys have, and I'm sorry for it. So, we had 1,300 people, almost 1,400 people respond to the survey. And basically, what they indicated was 43% had debt from undergraduate, 33% had debt from both. And someone just a few minutes ago told me I think they had $70,000 worth of debt from a program that they just finished. You change it. And if the breakdown by ethnicity, we had 28% African American, 7% API, Latino, 40% white, 8% multiracial, people in terms of identifying themselves. In terms of the type of school they went to, the majority that responded to the survey went to private school, but 34% went to public school. And I was having a conversation with a young man who I'm sure sat down and took a seat, but he was telling me about how Cal States are going to close down their admissions now because of the cutbacks on a state level. And, you know, I wish that, I mean, after serving in Sacramento and unfortunately having participated in making those cuts, I sure was hoping I was going to go to Washington and bring California a big check. And then, unfortunately, we all know what happened with the change in House leadership as soon as I got there. It's kind of bad news wherever I go. I mean, I went up to Sacramento, and the economy fell apart. I go to Washington, we lose the House. I don't know. In terms of the people who responded, their employment status, 50% of folks who were struggling to pay back their loans are employed full-time. 17% part-time, 19% unemployed. Now, one of the things that I have noticed that your generation does, your generation keeps going to school because they don't want to pay back their loans, and then they just accumulate more and more. So you guys have all these degrees, and then you have all this debt, and I just don't think that's right. So regardless of employment status, almost everyone is having difficulty, and I just explained that, you know, 95% obviously of those who are unemployed are struggling. So, next slide. So 54% of those folks who responded who are out of school can't pay. 47% are in repayment plans, 12% are delinquent, 19% are in deferment. So again, it just gives you a picture. The total debt of respondents said that, well, the median debt was $50,000, and most people have both federal and private debt. The majority of the people that responded have federal debt, and this gives you the median amount of federal debt is $38,000, and the median amount of private debt is $25,000. 71% reported that interest accumulated while they were in school. This is just not fair. I mean, I remember when my daughter was had student loans, and they would send the statement every month while she was in school, telling me that I could pay the interest, you know, if I wanted to. But having your interest accumulate while you're in school, I don't even understand the reason for that. Places where most people sought help, 71% sought help from the Department of Education, 25% from their lender. 32% have not sought help, and I know when I've talked to people, people have not known what to do in terms of where to go for help, and then when they've tried to approach their lender, they've essentially gotten the runaround, or basically just a hard-line position, this is what you're supposed to do. So again, student loan interest rates will double, costing students $2,800 in interest alone. I think this is if Congress does not act by July 1st. So just think about that now. We're on a 2-week break for Easter. We're going back mid-April, and we have a couple of months to act. One of the things that has been happening with this Congress, I have to tell you, is that we keep getting to deadlines, to the brink of the deadline. We were at the brink of the deadline, which was March 31st. Our transportation projects around the country were going to stop. And so, unfortunately, they couldn't get it together, and I say they because it actually didn't even involve the Democrats. It was internal to the Republicans. Couldn't get it together to put up a bill that they could support to extend transportation projects for a number of years. It's very hard to stop and start a freeway, okay? So what they did was they just went ahead and extended the funding for 90 days. And so I'm concerned that without pressure, and you guys can define pressure, without pressure, then what's going to make them stop? You know what I mean? In other words, resolve this, because if Congress doesn't act by July 1st, the interest rates will double for you guys, and that's just not fair. So with that, Keisha, I'm done. She told me I was finished now. Thank you.
Thanks again, Representative Bass. Let's give her another hand. Doing great work in D.C., representing us well. We're now joined by a very special guest, as Representative Bass mentioned earlier. We were joined by Rohit Chopra, who leads the Office for Students at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. How many folks here actually knew there was an Office for Students? Office for Students, anybody knew? I didn't know, but it's really good to know. Rohit also serves as the CFPB's Student Loan Ombudsman, a new position that was created by the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act. Rohit.
Should I sit here or you want me to go up? Okay. Okay. So, I'm not from LA, but I always like coming here because not only is it much more sunny, but I get time to do a lot of thinking when sitting in traffic on the way from the airport here. And actually, when I was driving today, you know, it's been a tough few years. And you can still see actually some of the visible signs of the problems with a tough economy. You can still see some of the boarded up shops. You can still see the for sale signs that clearly have been there for a while. But things are getting better. But there's visible signs, but there's also some invisible signs. And the invisible signs are a lot of the stories that a lot of us hear every day. Just recently, we talked to somebody who was struggling to figure out about whether they should make the payment on their rent or their car payment or their student loan payment. They had to choose between the three. And they said, well, I've got to get to work, so I guess I'll make my car payment because at least I can live in my car. And so actually this isn't how things ought to be. And I see that all over, students and young people were the innocent bystanders of a financial system that didn't always play by the rules. And you see what's happening because of that. Because the economy melted down, you saw that states and local governments couldn't collect taxes. They then had to make cuts to state universities and colleges and community colleges. Individual families maybe they were facing unemployment or they're upside down on their mortgage. So now it's April and lots of people are getting college acceptance letters. But because of all of these effects, people are needing to borrow more and more debt. Every year, it feels like it's the same story of higher tuition and higher student loan debt. And so we've started to think about how we can plug the holes in that boat that sunk. And part of it was actually fixing the fact that there was two sets of rules. There was one set of rules for the community banks and credit unions, and there was another set of rules for the rest of the financial system. They could give loans, they could sell them and securitize them, and even if they gave it to someone they knew couldn't pay it back, they were still okay. And so, like Congresswoman Bass said, there was some big financial reform. It's kind of hard to understand all of the intricacies, even for those of us who work in it, but there was one key piece that is big, is that finally, we don't have two sets of rules. We have one set of rules. And there is a singular accountable agency to make sure that the rules are being followed, that there are consequences for people who don't follow the rules, and that we give people all of the tools they need to make good decisions rather than navigating reams and reams and reams of fine print. And you know, when you go on the internet, you all see how we all click, I accept the terms and conditions of this website. Now, you should print that out one time. Because when you print it out in 12-point font, you'll run out of ink toner. So we've only been up and going for a few months, but we've started on a few key things to try and make sure there's common sense rules of the road and that we're not all about fine print. So let me tell you a little bit about this new agency, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Go to the next slide. So the CFPB, like I said, we're trying to make sure that markets, all sorts of markets, credit cards, mortgages, payday loans, check cashers, everyone, that markets are fair and transparent and that people have to follow a clear set of rules. Now, this CFPB, it is an independent agency with its own dedicated funding source to avoid meddling in the political process. And we're all new to Washington, but we all learned that very quickly. There's a lot of influence. And so, like we mentioned a few months ago, we had a new director, and we can now use our full set of tools. Can go to the next slide. So let's talk about one thing that we already started doing. It might be a little hard for you to read, but when people are getting student loan and financial aid information, they sort of get this. Now, I put two. The first one, I took these from actual financial aid letters. And part of the problem is that when you get information on student loans, you're not even sure what it is. This is my expertise, and I can't tell you what some of these codes are on here. It's full of jargon and fine print and charts that don't actually allow you to make an informed decision. So here's what we did. You can go to the next slide. We already started making a shopping sheet with better information that clearly shows you how much debt are you going to have after graduation, what's going to be your monthly payment, and what are some things that can tell you whether or not you might be able to repay that debt. Let's go to the next slide. We also immediately put up a way to figure out how to navigate the student loan repayment options. Right now, you have all sorts of protections under the federal loans, but you don't necessarily know how to navigate the private loans. So we create a web tool for anyone who's a veteran or active duty service member. We have additional special information. Go to the next. Now, Congresswoman Bass said people don't even know where to go if they have problems. Well, now, as of a few weeks ago, we have a student loan complaint system open for business. Anyone who goes to consumerfinance.gov and files a complaint, we will give you a tracking number, and you can always track the status of it, and we make sure that the financial institution gets back to you in a reasonable amount of time, and we're going to be checking those responses to make sure that everything's in accordance with the law. So finally, people actually have a place to turn and get some answers. Go to the next page. So this is a very quick overview, but I think, Congresswoman, we're starting to put the pieces together to create an agency that actually works for people and to make sure the markets work. So if people have any questions, we're happy to answer them, but just wanted to let you know and everyone here in LA know that I think we're getting off to a good start. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Rohit. Thank you for all the hard work that you're doing for us. Thank you for the very informative information. This is going to follow me, so I'm just going to hold on to it. So at this time, we would like to take questions from the audience. If you have a question, you can line up at one of the microphones in the room. Looks like we have one here, this corner. Just this one, right up here. Okay, so each person will have 1 minute to state either a question or a comment. If your question or comment is longer than a minute, unfortunately, we're going to have to cut you off in order to make sure that we have as many people as possible ask a question or make a comment. Okay, so this question and comment period should be focused on either policy or big picture questions, because remember, during the second part of tonight's program, you're going to have an opportunity to talk with experts regarding your personal matter. So as a reminder, we have representatives from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, from the Departments of Education, Financial Aid, from USC and Cal State Dominguez Hills, and from the Department of Education. So a staff member will be holding the microphone for you. If you could go ahead and take the first question.
Yep, my question is on a resolution right now in Congress. It was put forward by Representative Walter Jones, and he's a Republican, but I'm not going to take a side on the issue due to the fact that today with the party system, you don't really have, basically the Constitution is not that popular anymore. And this has already occurred as something which has been, let me read the resolution real quick. This is what it says: expressing the sense of Congress that the use of offensive military force by a president without prior or clear authorization of an act of Congress constitutes an impeachable high crime and misdemeanor under Article 2, Section 4 of the Constitution. And it goes on further with that, but Walter Jones has put this specific resolution up. The question is, can you support this resolution to defend the Constitution if Obama does declare an offensive military attack on, which they didn't say that.
Yeah, no, it's okay. His question is fine. I understand what you're asking, and I'll answer it. I just know a little bit about it, and so what he's asking is, and this, I'm not exactly sure what Mr. Jones, and there's 435 members of Congress, so I don't know this particular individual, but there is concern, oh good, thank you. There is concern, for example, when we intervened in Libya, there's also concern about the possibility of us, of Iran intervening in, of Israel intervening in Iran, and so the question is, if we get involved in another war, then the War Powers Act, and this would essentially strengthen the War Powers Act, and so he's asking me if I would support the resolution, and a resolution like this just means that this is what Congress thinks, so I will have to look at it and see. So I can't answer that right now. I am just familiar with the headline, so I will find out about it and let you know. You know, I just want to mention, because I always say this about student loans, because I think it's just pretty amazing, that the President and the First Lady didn't finish paying off their student loans until he became a senator. And the reason he was able to pay off, the reason they were able to pay off their student loans is because of his book sales. Because believe me, his congressional pay would have not allowed him to pay off his student loans.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman Bass. I'm so excited to hear about the work that you're doing in D.C. in regards to, student loan, reform and what your colleagues are saying, as you mentioned earlier. And I was one of the students that were there in the living room that morning. And in addition to naming the bill, what else can we do? I mean, I'm a part of a few national networks, my college alumni network, my fraternity, my Facebook, and so this is not just an issue that's affecting folks here in the 33rd district, but folks who are all over the nation. So in what ways can we put pressure on some of the folks in D.C. in order to make sure that we support you in this endeavor as well?
Well, it's important that you always communicate, and I, having served in the state legislature and knowing how that works, a lot of things that come up because of leadership. And so I can tell you that the Speaker of the House is named John Boehner, and the head of the Senate is Harry Reid. And so if you want to communicate with your elected officials, you can certainly do that. And then there's a variety of things that you can, ask. But one thing that I'm really concerned about is if Congress doesn't act by the end of June, the interest rates will double. And there are a lot of pieces of legislation that could move forward to help the situation. But the leadership is the one that has the authority to make those decisions.
Hello, Ms. Karen Bass. My question has to do with the idea of the Glass-Steagall Act, which right now, as you were pointing out, some of these interest rates that are charged on student loans are pretty high compared to what banks like Goldman Sachs get when they go to the Federal Reserve, and they get like a 0%, almost like a 0% loan from the federal government. And the Glass-Steagall Act is actually a resolution that is introduced in the House of Representatives. It has something like 60
By who?
sponsors.
By who?
It was introduced by Marcy Kaptur from Ohio. And it has this, like 60 co-sponsors, and that would be a legislation that is much stronger than the so-called Wall Street reform. So, are you going to sponsor that Glass-Steagall, or are you going to allow another bailout of the financial system?
So I think maybe just to jump in here, the Dodd-Frank financial reform attempts to make sure that when banks fail, it doesn't actually impact the rest of us. And when that there is more of a regime to make sure that the laws are being followed. Now, there's many ways that bill was, changed over time, and there's a lot more pending things that people are considering. But I think we're still in the beginning phase of implementing a lot of what we started.
Well, and when it comes to that, actually, Marcy is a friend of mine. I'll get back and talk to her. I probably would co-sponsor that bill along with the 60 other members, and thank you for raising it. Marcy Kaptur, just so you know, just finished winning her election. She was actually running in a primary against Dennis Kucinich. And because of redistricting, they were pitted against each other. So thank you for reminding me. I was aware about it. I'll contact Marcy when I get back, and more than likely would be a co-sponsor.
For the sake of time, if we could keep our questions to a minute and keep them policy related, that would be great. That's our last question at the end of the line. We want to make sure we have plenty of time for folks to engage in the workshops. Yes, your question, please.
Good evening. So I just want to say some of us who have loan debt are not young people. I just finished a PhD program and I'm in debt up to my ears. I have full-time employment at California State University Northridge, which is a nationally recognized Hispanic learning center. But I cannot get credit for teaching there for 5 years and get a loan forgiveness because it is not a high school. So I would like to see that policy change, that if we're teaching in public education, that we are able to incur our loan.
Yeah, so there is a program, Public Service Loan Forgiveness, on your federal loans. And if you are participating in that program, if you have 10 years of service at any nonprofit, educational, charitable institution, there is a program that actually can help you. And at the Department of Education workshop, they'll be able to tell you more about that. There is also separately a program for teacher loan forgiveness that helps people pay off those loans. But we can share more information about that later.
That's for you. Coming from USC as student body president, isn't that what you were? President of the, you were student body president, right? Go ahead. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Barry Levine. I'm a professional photographer. I'm chair of the Education Committee of the South Robertson Neighborhood Council and the father of two brilliant daughters, one studying for a PhD in evolutionary developmental biology at Stanford, and the other has a master's degree in critical media studies from UCLA. Both girls funded large chunks of their education with student loans. Understanding the terms and the ins and outs of the student loan program is very confusing, and I'm sure on purpose to protect the profits of the student loan folk. I want to thank you for helping us understand and possibly change this system. Your flyer says the president's asking Congress to keep the Stafford loans at 3.5. That doesn't reflect my reality. I have 3 Stafford loans that I'm paying on, one at 6.5, one at 6.4, and one at 6.8. I have a PLUS loan that's paying 8.5%, the largest of my loans. Sally Mae sold one of my loans to Nelnet, who immediately increased my monthly payment on a fixed rate loan.
Oh my God.
Which I found intolerable. What I would like to see is a reduction in the interest rate the bank's profiting on our student loans, and the way to consolidate all my loans into one loan at 3.5%. Thank you.
So one thing that has changed in recent times is that before, banks actually would issue federal student loans, and the government was on the hook if something went wrong. They guaranteed it. But starting about a year and a half ago, all loans now are issued directly by the Department of Education and no longer issued through banks. So that actually, I hear, saved taxpayers, will save tax $87 billion. So it started, but you're right. There are a lot of people with loans in the old system, and we have to figure out how to manage that debt, and the interest rates is one piece of that.
Thank you.
Good evening, Congressman. I work in healthcare. I've been there. I started as a phlebotomist back in 1984 in the military. Got my first job at Scripps Green Hospital in San Diego. And now I'm upper management at a cancer research firm here. And I just noticed recently, besides the problem of debt, the starting salary for a phlebotomist is the same starting salary I had 20 years ago. So what other policies are going on that not only deals with the debt, but deals with this problem of lack of salary improvement?
Well, you know, just to be honest with you, well, thank you. You know, I actually come out of healthcare, and so I just to be honest with you, there isn't anything that's happening right now in terms of raising salaries. You should know that, you know, I'm just in my second year in Congress, but one of the things I hope to do is to impact the Affordable Care Act, because I'm concerned that we're supposed to increase coverage to 30 million people, but I'm not sure who's going to do that. And one of the struggles that we're having in Congress is that you know that the Republicans want to completely repeal health care reform. They're not able to completely repeal it, but what they can do is starve it. And so there is one advisory board that is supposed to happen that's looking at the workforce that would down the line address what you're saying, but right now Congress is not allowing it to have any money. So there isn't anything happening with that right now. That's why, you know, my other job is to figure out how, you know, we deal with the Tea Party, but that's a whole nother issue. We need 25 seats, and then things would change.
Hi.
25 seats in the House of Representatives, and the Democrats would be back in the majority. Lee just asked me, Lee Walensky, everybody knows Lee here, right? Activist extraordinaire. Just asked me, what about California? California could possibly contribute 5 seats. Yes, possibly.
The rest of the country, only 20.
Yes, there you go. See? Lee's solving the problem.
Maybe we should send some Californians into the rest of the country.
No. We need to worry about our 5. That's what we need. We need to stay right here and worry about our 5. But anyway, I'm digressing here.
Hi, my name is Joisa Jimeno. I'm from Radical Women, and I've lived in this neighborhood for 10 years, and I run a community center on Jefferson and Arlington, and it's surrounded by youth and families that either can't afford loans, and they sure as heck can't afford the tuition. And I graduated from college 10 years ago, and I'm still paying my loan back. And I know that these loan companies have already got their money back, so they're making profit off of loans that I've already, in their eyes, probably have already paid back, but I still have this loan that I'll be paying for the next 20 years. I think we need to be calling for canceling all debt with no conditions, taxing the banks and the corporations and the rich, and to fund free public education. The Cal State system should not be closing admissions. We shouldn't have to. Education in California, public education in California used to be free, little known fact. And so if we cancel the debt, we tax the people who have been causing this problem, then we will have the access to education that we all have the human right to have.
Here. She's going to take one of those 5 seats we have available in California. They're going to all vote for her. No, seriously, I agree with you. I don't understand how we have the richest country on the planet in the history of the world, and we can't figure out how to feed, clothe, house, take care of health care, and educate our population.
And again, the line is at its end, and so please keep your questions to 1 minute so we can get through as many of them as possible. Yes, ma'am.
Good evening. I'm trying to think of what's going on right now and also try to think of some solutions. And I thought of two things, and the one that keeps wanting to flitter away from me is, can we look into more paid internships?
Right.
So that students can start paying down on their student loans while they're interns and while they're still in school. And the one that's predominantly in my mind.
I have a group of interns here that are working in my office. They were just clapping right there.
Instigators. The other thing I was thinking about is way back in the 1970s, there used to be programs employers had where they would offset a certain percentage of the student debt for classes. Okay, that would then help the student if they earn a certain grade point level. And I wonder if we can look into getting back to those, incentivizing for employers to use those programs again.
In all seriousness, I joke sometimes, but I really do agree with you also, and I'm from the 70s, so I remember those times. But it's kind of like now, there's a whole culture that it doesn't matter what profession you work in, after you graduate, you're supposed to do free labor. I was used to that in the medical field. That's just standard. You graduate, I don't care what it is, phlebotomist, right? And you got to do all of these hours, of free labor. And it would be important to go back to paid internships, but it's an example of the philosophical divide that we're in right now, the vision over what type of country we want. And I don't know if you heard the president yesterday, but he was just right on the money. I sit on the budget committee, and Paul Ryan is a colleague of mine. It's important to read his document. It's called The Path to Prosperity. I think it's the path to despair, but if you read his document, you will see that it's a philosophical argument that's basically, as the president called it, social Darwinism, which means the survival of the fittest. It redefines our country, and it essentially dismantles the safety net and says that our country doesn't need health care anymore, our country doesn't need Social Security, and those resources should essentially be turned over to private industry, but make sure we don't touch with one penny the defense industry. And so that's the battle that we're in right now. That's the division that we're in. And I do think that, in the presidential election, we have two clearly different viewpoints. I don't think it should be confusing about the choice.
Okay, sorry, one more reminder, please keep your comments to 1 minute, and because Solomon will pull the mic away from you if it gets longer. We want to make sure everybody gets to make their comment and ask a question.
Please.
Thank you.
First off, can I have an appointment with you? My name is Chuck Stewart. I got my PhD from USC in 1995 in International Intercultural Education with a certificate in Women's Studies. Yes, I'm one of the few men with a degree in Women's Studies. But by the early 2000s, I found myself in financial problems with medical problems, blah, blah, blah. I ended up in bankruptcy. Attorneys, Department of Education, they all told me you could not bankrupt your student loans. I dug deeper into it. Yes, you can bankrupt your student loans through what's called an adversary proceeding. I did so. I did bankrupt my student loans. Why I bring that up is because 1.4 million Americans will go into bankruptcy. Half of those have student loans. 700,000 people a year should be filing a bankruptcy for their student loans, yet only 100 do. So my question to you is, how can we ask the bankruptcy courts to inform people of their right to include their student loans in a bankruptcy through an adversary proceeding? Because no one seems to know that.
So, My understanding of the bankruptcy laws is that for many people, they have to show a very high threshold in order to get any relief from student loans, unlike credit cards or other credit products. Now, this is certainly something that Congress is considering, but when it comes to what we're trying to do, we can't actually, our agency doesn't, control the bankruptcy laws, but there seems to be a lot of desire to figure out what is it that people can do when they have trouble. So for federal loans, there are some of these programs like income-based repayment and some of the loan forgiveness programs. But for private loans, there aren't necessarily those protections in place. So this is something that we have to look at and see, what can people do if they're struggling with their private loans in order to get some help. And I encourage everybody who does need some help, again, go to consumerfinance.gov, file a complaint, or call us, and we'll try and help you. But again, for most people, my understanding of the law is that it's very, very challenging.
Actually, 60% or more of the people who file an adversarial proceeding are successful at bankrupting their student loans. People just don't know this. So I'm trying to ask how, when you file your Chapter 7 or 13 bankruptcy with the court, and they send you back some documents, can we put a paragraph in there reminding people of their right to file an adversarial proceeding within 90 days of the meeting of the creditor? That's all. I'm just trying to remind people of their right. I've talked to the bankruptcy courts, and they said it has to be an act of Congress. So that's why I'm here.
Okay. So there needs to be legislation then. Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. No, I'm happy to do that, and I'll tell you what would help me. I mean, again, the reason why I have the legislation I do now is because a group of young people told me to do it. So what would be very helpful is if you would write it out, in a paragraph so that I understand exactly what you're saying. Oh, okay. Okay, hey, he comes with a book. That's pretty good. Can't beat that. Richard Courtray is the head of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the man that I was telling you about that President Obama appointed that was the controversy. And I mentioned that I met with him last week. Well, I invited him to come to LA. And so in June, Congressmember Javier Becerra and I are going to do a joint town hall with him. And he'll be, right now we're talking about student loans, but we also have home loans, we have all this other stuff. And so, again, this is a brand new agency that's just getting started. But he is going to come in June, and we can raise other issues with him. So I just wanted you to know that. But let me just take a quick break for a minute because my dear colleague is here, Assembly Member Holly Mitchell from the 47th District. That will soon be the 54th District. And we were together this morning because the State Assembly did a public hearing on foster care, on the disproportionate numbers of young people of color in the child welfare system. And so we were at a meeting about that on the west side this morning, and so I asked her to come join me, and let me ask her to have a few words. Assembly Member Holly Mitchell.
Good evening. I'm going to be very brief because I see the line of questions, but I just wanted to come out and talk to you about a little something that we at the state level are doing to attempt to help middle-class families with students who are still willing to apply to the UC, the CSUs, and the community college. I know it's hard. I was at UCLA last week on the day that the letters roll out letting the freshmen know how many have been admitted. 72,000 applications were received, not system-wide, at UCLA alone. And they were only able to admit 12,000 freshmen. And that's because of what? Budget cuts. We're clear. So I'm thrilled, and there are brochures at the back table, to co-author with Speaker Perez what we're calling the Middle Class Scholarship Act. Over the last 4 years alone, UC tuitions have increased almost 200%, and the CSU tuition has increased almost 150%. I was talking to a colleague yesterday who had twin boys at UC Santa Barbara who graduated last year, and he had as a daughter who entered as a freshman. He paid more for her entering as a freshman today than he did for two of them when they entered as freshmen. Can you imagine? I thought that was such a tangible example of what we've done to middle-class working families in California and in limiting access to the public institutions that this governor's father created in the Education Master Plan all those years ago. So what we've done, brilliantly I may say, hats off to the speaker, is there's a corporate tax loophole for out-of-state corporations. That's what's so crazy. Something called the single sales factor that we're going to eliminate and use that $1 billion to create tuition breaks for middle-income students who apply to UC, CSU, and we'll give a break to students at the community college. The bill numbers are AB 1500 and AB 1501. They will require 2/3 because it's a quote-unquote tax.
That
So
means they need Republican votes.
we need Republican votes, which means we need you to take the brochure, sign up for more information. We need you to call somebody, write somebody, the governor, your legislator, your cousins and friends in the Inland Empire who live in Republican districts. We need you to really track and follow this legislation because it's a tangible way to put dollars back into the pockets of middle-class Californians and a tangible way to guarantee that California students still have access to these institutions. Tragically, because of economics, they've begun to admit more out-of-state students because they pay more. So I think this is a win-win-win all the way around for Californians. Again, I'm proud to co-author it, wanted to come given the topic today, and make sure you all know about AB 1500 and AB 1501. Thank you, Congresswoman.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Hi, my name is Tony Breslin. I owe you an apology. Really, I send your office occasional emails. 80% are encouraging, 20% are more encouraging. I just have to say, I find what you and the president are doing here to be just so noble and altruistic, helping Americans achieve their educational dreams.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
I find that there's just so little nobility and altruism these days. Cautionarily, if we compromise on this, we risk losing what little nobility there is left.
That's right. Thank you, that was very nice of you.
Good evening, Congresswoman Bass. My name is Taylor Dudley, and I'm an attorney at the Alliance for Children's Rights, which I know you're familiar with that organization where we provide free legal services to children in foster care. And I want to thank you for hosting this event tonight, and also add a comment actually for Rohit, and thank him for being here as well. My comment is about the public interest loan forgiveness program. You actually mentioned that, and I deeply appreciate that that program is available for attorneys and others involved with the public interest community like myself. However, I find that the public interest loan forgiveness program is deeply difficult to understand and access. And for instance, you can Google public interest loan forgiveness and find nothing. There is nothing there to know how to apply, nothing to know how to register, sign up, get more information. And unfortunately, when you call the Department of Education, they tell you to work in public interest for 10 years, make 120 payments, and then you'll suddenly be eligible, which I hope so, but how will I know for sure? So my comment is in relation to that, and I'm hopeful that you and your colleagues can work to resolve this issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, so the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program is eligible for people working in public service for 10 years. And you're right, I think all government agencies can be better about getting rid of fine print and making it just a lot easier to understand. So we'll make sure we share that feedback.
What'd you say?
If they go right to studentloans.gov, there's a link right there that says Public Service Loan Forgiveness, and it has the application right there, and it's pretty clear.
Yeah, so it's clear to some, but to apply and actually get it, you have to first finish your 10 years of service.
Can we add that on our website, Paul?
My name is Maritza, and I joined the military with the hopes of getting out of South Central and paying for my education. However, when I tried to get the VA to pay for my loans, it was so hard that I ended up with student loans. So how can we make it easier for people who serve the military to have access to the GI Bill, especially now that we have more people coming home? And this is also common. I think in order to prevent this from happening, instead of offering, ceramics and cooking classes in high school, they should offer more financial aid classes to help children know how to administer their finances, because I had no idea until I turned blank age. So that's all I got to say about it.
Good evening. My name is Cassandra Kirby, and as a current grad student, I'm wondering if the bill that's being presented tonight will include me and those who recently graduated maybe within the past 5 years, since the interest rates have gone up in that period of time.
Well, I'm sorry. The bill will it include you?
I'm a current graduate student. I'll be graduating in May, and I'm wondering if the bill that you're presenting, if it's passed,
Yes.
will it include students who are currently in the program
Yes.
or graduates?
Yes.
within maybe the past
Yes,
5
it will. And then, truth be told, the way federal legislation takes, by the time it passes, you would have graduated.
Yeah.
It takes a while. Yeah, no, it would. It would.
Oh, good evening. My name is David Alvarez. My wife and I have 3 jobs between the 2 of us. And, as we're raising our kids, we saved, we invested, we put away for college. When we finally applied for FAFSA, my son was going to college, I was rejected. I got 0. And so that was the first kid. And now, to date, I have about $150,000 of student loans for my kids. And I'm not done yet. I have 2 more kids. I figure by the time I'm 89, I'll have it paid off, because it'll be about $300,000, which is about a mortgage 30 years. So for those who have put some money away, I missed the threshold for being able to get any student loans from my kids. But to have to pay $300,000 until I'm 89, what can be done for someone like me, someone like us?
So one of the things we're finding out is that so many people have so much debt, actually, and people are wondering, why isn't the housing market recovering? And some people are thinking maybe part of the reason is that people have so much trouble paying down their student loan debt, they can't save up for a down payment or for a first house. And it affects all of us. Now, in your specific situation, a lot of it's going to depend on the details, and I think part of in the workshops with the Department of Education and others, we can problem solve that. But you're right, there's a lot of different options. Some of them are harder to navigate than others. Sometimes there's forms, sometimes it's easy to understand. But we all have more work we can do on that.
Great, thank you so much, all of you, for very insightful, informative questions and comments. Now, we're going to move into the workshop portion of the evening.